happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 243 on December 29th, 2021. My name is Dr. Jason Neiffer, and in 40, 50, 52 hours, I'm going to be the executive director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana State Virtual School located on the beautiful University of Montana campus right here in fabulous Missoula, Montana. And joining me, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer. How are you tonight, sir?
Good evening, Jason. I am doing great. I'm appreciative for calendar reminders because having the extremely rigorous vacation schedule that I do, if I hadn't had my Apple Watch go off and remind me, I might not have been here. But I want to say happy birthday to my mother, who is unlikely to actually tune into the show, but I'm going to say that nonetheless. And I am here in Oklahoma City, where I am still the Technology Integration and Innovation Specialist at the Cassidy School for a mere 5 more months. And I do not have any job announcements. However, I will say that after applying to 19 positions, there are 3 that I actually know some people in high places, which I hope might make a difference. And so, yeah, hopefully I'm going to have some interviews here in the next couple months and have some exciting news to share. But we may stay in Oklahoma. We may be, headed out. Who knows? But we are here to talk about some tech news, and we took the week off last week. So did you celebrate Festivus, Jason, in some way? Was a steak a Festivus celebration?
No, steaks for Christmas dinner. I did. I'm trying to remember now what I did that night. I think I had tacos, which is actually a perfectly appropriate Festivus meal. But yes, there was Festivus festivities last week as part of my celebration of the multiple holidays of December. So
outstanding. And I'm hoping that you had some Christmas weather or snow on the ground.
Yeah, very much so. And in fact, we've got wicked cold coming. I don't think we're going to hit below 0 in Missoula until later this week, but like it was negative 15 last night in Helena. And then the place I always look is that northeastern Montana gets some wicked winter weather, but Wolf Point, Montana, which is in northeastern Montana, they were expecting negative 38. It is
that's without wind chill. That's like a regular.
That's without wind chill. Yeah, that's the actual temperature. It's negative 18 there now. And it looks like their low on Friday will be negative 26. So that's real cold weather. That's not that fake cold weather that you read about or see on television. This is the real stuff. So
we have had a ridiculously warm, December. I don't even think we've had a serious hard freeze. It's been in the 70s regularly in the last week. I think it was in the 60s today. It's just been really bizarre. Somebody said, oh yeah, we paid for this, last year when we did the ice storm, because a year ago in October was when we had this early ice storm and we really didn't have a fall. We just jumped right into winter. But yeah, I think next weekend we're supposed to get some cold weather, and maybe we're going to get our first hard freeze. But wow, what a bizarro winter it has been. So, what are we here to do tonight, Dr. Neiffer? Besides talk a little bit about, the cursory weather update.
Sure. Well, the weather's always delightful to talk about, especially when you're from states like Montana. But the EdTech Situation Room is a once-a-week podcast where we take a look at the headlines. And Wes and I have combed through the tech news. It's slowed down a little bit in the last couple of weeks, in part because there's been nothing really new to announce, and the holiday tends to diminish the amount of news focused on tech. But we found some articles that we'll discuss tonight. You can always see all of the links we're taking a look at, whether we talk about them on the show or not, at our website, edtechsr.com/links, and that will take you to this shockingly large Google document that we've amassed. For now, January will be our 6-year anniversary of doing the podcast, which seems really out there that we've been going at this long. Seems like just a couple of weeks ago we were getting started on this, but we're thankful for all of you that have been along for the ride. So, Wes, is there any particular place that you'd like to start this evening?
Oh, let's see. I did contribute some articles tonight, so I'm not feeling like the slacker I felt like last night. Let's talk about, you dropped an article in, so I didn't do another one, but The Verge, December 28th, Alexa told a child to do potentially lethal challenge. Fortunately, mom was there to say, don't do that. And she said, my kid's smart, wouldn't do this. But evidently you can ask Madam A, I shouldn't have said her name, for challenges. And so there is a popular challenge going around TikTok where you're supposed to partially unplug a light bulb, or sorry, a socket, an electrical socket. You're supposed to, unplug a little bit and then touch a coin to see whether or not you get sparks or a full-on fire. Obviously, really, really dangerous. And so Amazon did confirm that this happened and that has fixed the error. This is the first time I've heard of something like this. I mean, we probably all heard this last fall, I think, about the TikTok challenge to damage and vandalize things in your school and video it. And I know in Edmond schools north of us, they had some incidents supposedly attributed to this. And so there's just different viral, things that people on TikTok, and who knows who that is, are encouraging. But this is the first time I've heard of sort of a smart assistant gone bad. And it reminds a little bit of the Microsoft chatbot a few years ago that they were going to allow the people to educate, and it became this really profane, sexist, and racist and horrible personality that they just had to shut down. And so anyway, this was a bit of a surprise. So Jason, I'm sure, in the course of needing things over the holidays to help entertain you and cure boredom, you've been asking Madam A all the time for the latest challenges. And we're really happy to have the latest TikTok challenge just, show up as part of her repertoire.
Well, it's funny you should mention this particular topic because this was the area of my doctoral dissertation research where I took a look at so-called smart assistants from the context of education. And I will tell you, when I first saw this headline, I just assumed that this was a parent that was overreacting. This didn't actually happen, right? And I'm glad that I clicked on further articles down the road, because this Verge article actually has Amazon confirming that it happened, but it also makes a broader point that I think is something we need to be very mindful of if we're going to use an agent to search the internet as opposed to searching for it ourselves, which is when you add another layer to the search process, the Amazon Echo Madam A tool on the Amazon Echo and its related tools. I mean, that, when you're asking a question, it has to go out to the larger internet, and I'm sure it uses APIs and search engines like Google, for example, for that reason. But that's another layer of technology that's trying to figure out what your answer is. And unlike when you're on a search engine, you don't have the luxury to say, no, not that article, I want the next one. Or if it doesn't have anything to do with what you're doing with, you can't really ask again, nor can you ask for more details or even a separate answer. That's just not really how the technology works right now. And that Verge article is super interesting because it talked about the challenge that Google's had in this, because obviously they have an intelligent personal assistant as well. And there was someone on Twitter that posted information regarding if you asked Google, had a seizure, now what? The info it showed was from a section of a web page describing what not to do when someone was having a seizure, as opposed to what to do. And it talks about the challenge here of parsing correct or appropriate information. Because it's interesting. I would assume that part of the challenge here is when you use the word challenge, that's a loaded social media term now, right? That we didn't have a chance to talk about this since it happened a couple weeks back, but the whole TikTok challenge regarding the potential of violence utilizing guns a couple weeks back. I mean, that ended up being
Some schools canceled school. Yeah, it was supposedly not credible. I read things and whatever, but I mean, some school districts literally canceled school because of this TikTok threat.
Yeah. Well, and schools were put in a basically impossible situation. I mean, there was a lot of administrator groups, safety groups, some police departments, said that the risk doesn't appear credible, But at the same time, you can't. I mean, if something then does happen, well, you had a warning, right? Like, and you did nothing about it.
Some schools actually did lockdown drills
Mhm.
that day. I think that was terrible. So it just reminds of Columbine and how overall it's just so. This is the dark side of media and traveling news at the speed of light and whatever. It just you kind of wish you didn't have those kinds of influences, but here we are. So
Yep,
yeah, very very
absolutely.
tough for administrators.
Yep.
All right, where to next, sir?
Okay, let's do some security articles because something interesting has happened in the last 24 hours, and then I found another interesting article I thought would be interesting to talk about. I have several references here to this first one. I discovered this on Twitter yesterday, and that initial article reported to the Record on December 28th that LastPass confirms credential stuffing attack against some of its users. And what's really interesting about this is that if you were using, assuming we know the whole story, and I will say LastPass is taking it kind of on the chin in social media right now because there are some people that aren't buying what they're saying. I've been somewhat placated by their public messaging on this, and if it is what they say it is, I think they've taken an appropriate response. But they were under what's referred to as a credential stuffing attack, and what that is that if you have a username and password that you utilize over multiple sources, right? So you use the same username and password for site A and site B, and site A gets compromised, and you end up in one of the large compromised password databases. Bad actors will sometimes utilize those to try to get into other websites, right? So if you used it over multiple websites, that's why we advise, a unique password for every website. So some people were getting notifications that there were people were trying to get into their accounts. There's been some traffic today suggesting that maybe more people were getting notifications than actually should have been. That is concerning, but that will work itself in the wash too. And then that led to a lot of Twitter back and forth on this. And then LastPass ultimately talked about or released a blog post and been consistent on social media saying that none of our passwords were compromised, but there were people, third-party actors, trying to use LastPass or other website compromised passwords to try to get into people's LastPass accounts. So they reported both on their blog, and then The Verge repeated their reports today that there were no passwords compromised following a breach scare, and that probably was much ado about nothing. But the advice that I gave yesterday, which is the first thing I did, it's been a little while since I've changed my master password on LastPass. So I went yesterday and I've got 2 LastPass accounts that I utilize in context of my professional and personal life. I updated my password to a new, unique, secure password. And so the only thing I want to say here is that, if you're using a password manager, and both Dr. Fryer and I recommend you do, I think it's a really important part of good security strategy and hygiene to utilize a different username and different password for every website that you use. The only way to pull that off meaningfully is a password manager. And I like LastPass so much, I purchase a pro account for that. But, you do need to change that password occasionally because chances are it's probably that one password is not going to get compromised. But it's just a good idea for a variety of reasons to do that. So, Wes, I can't remember. Are you a LastPass person or using another password manager?
So I use one password manager for school, and as I am, looking forward to the transition to new employment this summer, I'm actually glad not to have everything conflated because I'll leave my school, passwords behind in one password manager, and I've got my personal in another. I actually today was so thankful to have made the transition to a password manager years ago. I have 579 saved passwords in my personal password manager. That is just incredible. And actually, on Christmas Eve, I suffered a pretty debilitating hack on my virtual private server, which took down the EdTech Situation Room website along with some others. And thankfully, my backups have all been in place, and I've been able to restore them. But yes, thankful for the password manager. My main thought on this is, like, I think that and I haven't done extensive reading on this. I read initially an article and just a few follow-ups. It sounded like some journalists really jumped the gun in reporting, hey, some people said they had a unique password and LastPass told them to reset it, and that means LastPass has been breached. And that was, they didn't really have the evidence to support it, and it doesn't sound like it's there in terms of a breach. One of the things that is easy to do is to scare people away from password managers, and I've had this conversation with so many teachers. Well, wait a minute, I'm going to put all my eggs in that basket. Isn't that dangerous? Well, you are, but it's really the only way to do what you have to do, and that is to maintain unique passwords and use long and complex ones and not go insane. So as we see, sometimes with journalists, wanting to get a headline out there, wanting to, be the first one to break the news. I think that journalists, jumped the gun with this, and it's good that we don't have, confirmed widespread, data breach. LastPass has confirmed that this attack took place, but it's not like, oh yeah, millions of our users, had their accounts hacked, and it's going to be on haveibeenpwned.com because LastPass has been breached. The other thing I'd say is, I will not be doing this because I'm not the technology director anymore. But for years, really pretty much all 4 years I was tech director, I had opportunities when we would gather at the beginning of the year and really mid-year after Christmas break to say some things to our faculty about technology. And usually almost every single time I would talk about security. And credential stuffing is a really important phrase, if you're not familiar with it, to get familiar with and to share it. We're still, many of us, on Christmas holidays, vacation break. Have you talked about security and passwords and password managers with your loved ones and your family? Credential stuffing, we talked about months ago when Disney Plus came out. There were these headlines, oh my gosh, Disney Plus hacked. No, there are passwords for sale on the dark web. And so hackers used the emails and passwords that were for sale on the dark web. And they said, oh, I wonder if so-and-so, they have these programs that can do this in an automated way. I wonder if they used their favorite password on their new Disney Plus account. Oh my gosh, they did. And so people had their accounts broken into, but it was because they were using that repeated password. So I think this is an important article. Number one, to help reassure people that password managers are the best practice for maintaining a secure digital life today. And that's face-to-face life, just your life. And then number two, what is account stuffing? And this gets back to what we've said a couple weeks ago about the audit, that all of us need to be paying attention to Watchtower or whatever the password manager and the Google Chrome. Actually, Apple does this now within the security and password menu. It checks it against the databases like Have I Been Pwned. Google does this with the Chrome password manager too. We need to pay attention to that. Do you have repeated passwords? Do you have insecure passwords? Do you have compromised passwords? All of those things can be revealed, and it's painful and it takes time, but we've got to go in and get those things changed. So glad for you to bring this to our attention. And I would say, if there's one super practical thing that sometimes we just, talk a lot about, it is security and passwords. And we cannot emphasize enough how vital that is, because it's not a matter, I'll say this. It's not a matter of will you be hacked, it's a matter of when you will have some kind of compromised account. And just like now with, this web hack and all these WordPress sites, I've had a ridiculous, over 50 websites at one point that I was maintaining or, helping administer and whatever. All different passwords, all different accounts. And when your actual server is hacked, that's problematic, because it's kind of like a password manager. It's like, oh, great. Now, I have to go change all those passwords. But anyway, all of my websites weren't compromised. And again, I'm thankful to have a password manager and to be able to deal with it and to have backups, right? Because that's the key. Do you have your data backed up so that the bad guys haven't, caused you to lose data?
Absolutely. Well, there's one more quick article that's cybersecurity related, Wes, that I'd like to talk about for a moment, in part because a lot of these things were new to me. But TechCrunch had a great article this morning, 6 things in cybersecurity we didn't know a year ago. And I've got one to add to this. It isn't in their article, but let me just state a couple of these headlines or kind of sub-headlines here, Wes, and I'd love to get your reaction on these. The first one, ransomware costs businesses because of downtime, not the ransom payments. And this is not a particular surprise to me, but one of the things that's become really obvious in ransomware attacks over the last year is that one of the reasons why they're so effective is that oftentimes they ask for a relatively low amount of money, knowing that if you can if you can unlock all your files for your organization and pay out, maybe what seems like a lot of money, but in the grand schemes of things is not. 50K is a good example of that. Then you're more likely to pay that to have to deal with the huge UG that comes when you're clean up after a ransomware attack. And the U.S. Treasury estimates that ransomware operators are likely to make more from ransom payments in 2021 than they did during the past decade, in part because businesses know that, even if they increase it to 150,000, that's probably going to be worth it rather than dealing with the cleanup of ransomware. And so, always be diligent. I get to see a lot of the smaller attacks occur because of my status as an administrator on our email network, but we get pretty frequent. It's hard to tell if they're ransomware or not, but certainly phishing attacks are really common in our organization, and that's certainly true. So, as a recovering IT director, Dr. Fryer, are you surprised by this fact at all?
Oh, I am not. I mean, that was just the trend. That's why I wanted to talk about security issues whenever I had a chance to visit with faculty, because it didn't matter what grade level you taught or what your staff role was, you're handling passwords. And some people are going to be, like HR and business office are going to be handling more sensitive, kinds of data and information, but we're all handling some kind of sensitive data and information. So not surprised. The trend lines are just, going to continue to increase. And this is not anything that I think we see a decrease in, because we're living more and more of our lives online.
Yep.
And crime pays online. And, there's probably some night, some Batman phrase or something like that you can talk about as far as crime. But basically, if crime pays, then and the incentive is there's really high payouts. You're going to continue to see a lot of it. So get your password manager, get your accounts audited, get your stuff backed up, have a plan both personally on what you will do if you get hacked, if your accounts get compromised. Turn on two-factor on everything that you can. And then for your organization, ask, doesn't matter what your job is, you can ask, hey, what's our ransomware mitigation plan? Do we have any insurance for that? What are our backups? And you don't need to be the tech director to ask that question. And they may give you a more technical answer than you need. But unfortunately, there are still a lot of organizations that don't have really good plans for this. And that is like not having an umbrella and living in Seattle or something. I mean, it would really, really be dumb to not have a good plan. And it's so much better to get together a plan and think about that and, make decisions when you are not in the heat of the moment, under attack. The servers are down, student data is inaccessible. Oklahoma City had that nightmare. I think it was right. Maybe it was the year before the pandemic, but it was in May, right at the end of the year, right? Ransomware, everything's locked up, student information system, everything. And that's going to continue to happen sadly, even to hospitals and schools, which we think, why would they attack? Well, guess what? There's vital information there, and sometimes people do pay. So,
Yep, absolutely. A couple other quick headlines on here. Cybersecurity venture capital funding doubled over the last year, which is not a surprise to me, and I have a kind of related fact. I know that there is a lot of effort on behalf of career technical education folks to try to get more cybersecurity content in high schools. both so that teachers can become more aware as they're teaching these classes. That helps raise awareness amongst faculty, but then secondarily, because cybersecurity experts are at a huge premium right now, it's a slightly different kind of programming than folks that are in computer science or coding, which is another high focus effort for a lot of CTE folks. But that's something that my organization is involved in as we look to try to provide opportunities across the state of Montana for students. That one's probably not a real shock. This one I'd heard about initially on NPR a couple months ago, but in April, the FBI launched an operation to remove backdoors in several hundred U.S. companies where an email server was hacked into by hackers. China was ultimately blamed for the exploitations, but in some cases, the FBI found it was probably just easier for them to go in and clean up the backdoors than try to go through the official notification process to work with IT in individual companies to do that. And and I got to say, like, when I first read that, it gave me pause, but they're probably right. Then in a lot of cases, them closing that hole was more important, at least at the time. I'm sure companies were notified afterwards than it was to wait around to go through formal channels.
I just continue to listen to a lot of podcasts about Russia. And I tell you what, we all need to be ready for emergency preparedness, whether it's cold weather and, the power goes out for a while, or it's a tornado or something else. We were talking a couple of weeks ago about this. There was a guy who really focuses on how accurate people are at forecasting the future, and a lot of times pundits that get headlines don't necessarily predict the future. But I really believe that in Jason and my lifetime, we're going to see some much more significant cyber attacks against the United States, against critical infrastructure, that are going to have an impact on our lives. And so it just, there's a lot of stuff that can be overwhelming, and what do we do? But, we need to be prepared to the degree that we can for some natural disasters, and that, as at an individual level and at an organizational level, because it's just, we probably underestimate the amount of hostility that both Russia and China have for us in the United States today. And it is, cybersecurity is an absolute growth industry. We absolutely need students to be aware of those opportunities and to find channels to them. I know at the Moodle Moot a couple summers ago, I had a chance to connect with some absolutely fantastic educators that are doing just great stuff at different levels, some post high school and some in high school, with hackathons and different kinds of challenges. So both from a practical, hey, what are you going to do to earn a living, in this wild world of changing jobs and AI, but also, it's just, we need folks to protect us, and every organization needs savvy folks that have some knowledge in this area. So I do think it was quite a milestone for the FBI to not only do that, which is eye-opening, but for the judge to uphold it as well. And maybe that's a sign of the times. But it also, I think, points to the fact that we need to be upgrading, we need to be taking a look at security, and we need to be investing in security, because, just kind of like with my websites and things, you may not want to revisit this stuff, but hey, you got to do it, because the bad guys are constantly looking for vulnerabilities, and software that's not patched and updated gets to be insecure and gets to be a target. And it's kind of the thing of going on a hike and the bears running. You want to be fast, you don't want to be the slowest Joe on the hike with the bears coming. You don't want to have the biggest target on your back, and it's pretty easy to do that if you're not making the investment and putting in the time to revisit those things regularly.
Yep, absolutely. And then one last thing from this article that I also thought was fascinating is that from the article, fraudsters are targeting car insurance sites for unemployment benefit scams. And talk about, creative crooks here. They were talking about how several car insurance companies were targeted in 2021 for an unlikely but increasingly common scam. And the information they were looking for was scraping driver's license numbers, because in a lot of states, the driver's license number is important for applying for state unemployment benefits. So that's what the scam came from, was that, it's interesting to me in part because one of the reasons why driver's license moved away from the social security number, right, was because we want to keep that number more private. Well, lots of things are still attached to your driver's license. So if you're not protecting that number, or if it can get hacked into in a database like a auto insurance database, then that's going to provide fodder for thieves. So again, a super interesting, and Wes, you said it very correctly earlier. This has become this will become much increasingly critical part of our lives, and the more we can work together to find good habits to make sure that our information stays secure, the better off we all are.
Hopefully my third TEDx talk is going to get published. I thought it was going to be this fall, but that's what the focus of it is being a what did I call it? A technology fear therapist, but
Yeah.
helping folks in your life with password managers, and because it can be easy to some level to get people scared. It's also easy to be numbed by these headlines. But the key is, what do you practically do? So you recognize there's a threat. What do you do? All right. Well, hey, can we talk some tech correction?
Let's do it.
All right. So there's 3 articles. I'll do 2, and I think you put in one as well. This is Axios on December 24th. Russia fines Google $100 million for not removing banned content. As longtime listeners of the show will know, Jason's term for what is happening with a lot of the response to big tech, and especially to problems with objectionable content, with overreach and privacy, and just the whole host of issues, especially with regard to Facebook, but other companies as well. This is so interesting internationally, right? Because the internet is global and laws are different, country to country. And so Russia does not want Navalny information. And if you're not familiar with Navalny, look at my Twitter feed for this. For today, I was actually listening to a really fantastic, what's it called? It was War College, and now it's called something else. Angry Planet. It's a great Angry Planet episode from Christmas Eve. Fake journalists are the latest disinformation twist. Oh, and then I was listening to World Affairs talking about Navalny. But Putin, President Putin, okay, dictator Putin, we should probably just say, probably the richest man in the world, by the way, hates Navalny, who is his number one opponent, who he's now jailed since he's come back. And anyway, they do not want to see that kind of information that is counter to the Russian propaganda narrative to be online. So how will Google respond? Probably they're going to be paying. They want to stay in Russia. But as we have these different states who have very different values, at least in terms of their leadership and their government with respect to free speech, than we do here in the United States and in most parts of the West, we're going to see more issues like that. And so, the internet in Russia, unless you're using a VPN or whatever, is just going to be a lot different. So I think that was kind of a milestone in terms of Russian stepping up their censorship of content by actually punishing social media companies that aren't doing their bidding. Then Ars Technica earlier in the month, on December 2nd, published a pretty interesting article. Judge tears apart Texas social media law for violating the First Amendment. So this is not international. This is here in the United States, in the state of Texas. And what the state of Texas passed a law saying was that basically platforms had to keep content even if they found it objectionable online, because otherwise it was going to violate the First Amendment rights that people have to free speech. And so the judge ripped this up, thankfully, saying it was replete with constitutional defects. Texas Governor Greg Abbott had signed the bill in September, quote, claiming the law is needed to protect Texans' First Amendment rights against a dangerous movement by social media companies to silence conservative viewpoints and ideas. We're not a political show. One of the facts to know about all this is some of the most viral content on, for instance, Facebook are conservative articles. And the idea that all conservative voices, are filtered on a platform like Facebook or Twitter is completely false. But really important to understand, like, who does the First Amendment actually restrict? It doesn't restrict private companies. In fact, the law of the land, Section 230, says that social media companies need to be making good faith efforts to try and police content. Otherwise, they can face consequences. Now, things happen. We had a live stream of a shooter in Christchurch, New Zealand, right? That was on Facebook and YouTube. Facebook and YouTube were not taken offline, by the FCC or whatever, because they don't have to police with 100% precision all content, which violates an acceptable use policy or, norms of acceptability, but they do have to police their content. So I thought that was a real positive article, but it also points to how, and this gets back to school and education, we need to be talking about, the First Amendment, free speech. That doesn't mean you get to say whatever you want, wherever you want, because you walk into a restaurant, a private place of business, a company like Twitter, a company like Facebook, they not only have the right and the ability to censor content and to decide what's going to be allowed and what's not, they also have an obligation to do that, under the law. Now, we could have Section 230 change, etc., but I thought both of those articles were pretty notable. Any comments on those, Dr. Neiffer?
Well, the misunderstanding of the First Amendment in our nation, especially as I trained as a government teacher, is pretty shocking because I had my own example of this a couple of years ago. I started kind of a little bit of a social media campaign with my friends to try to pressure my local newspaper to turn off commenting on their website because it was devoid of any, in my mind, social value and really made the newspaper quite unpleasant to read. I got some pushback from folks that said that they felt like there were significant free speech options there. And, we were able to work through it. And I explained my point of view, which is that you don't have any right to post on a newspaper. That's not, you could start your own newspaper. You can stand on a street corner with a sandwich board and say whatever within reason, say whatever you like. Can't scream fire in a crowded theater when there's no fire. That's been clearly established by Supreme Court, but I don't think that there is a lot of jurisprudence to suggest that everyone gets free reign to speak their mind on every platform available to them. And I think it's unmitigated chaos to suggest otherwise. And the other piece too is that, we have plenty of protection for people in the United States that want to release unpopular views via publishing a book, by publishing your own newspaper, by hanging a sandwich board around you and marching up and down Main Street. That's all very protected, and I would argue you should get protected for that. I am a huge free speech advocate personally to be able to do that, but social media throws a big wrench in this because both there isn't a lot of statistical support that one side or the other is being quashed by social media, right? There is some evidence to suggest that there is issues, but it's more universal, I think, than some want to claim. But at the same time, if social media largely replaces our avenues for expression, right? Because it's just not effective anymore to put a sandwich board on and march up and down Main Street as much as it is to post on Facebook. It creates a lot of very strange situations and issues.
And this just brought a couple things to mind. The state of Illinois is one of the first states in the United States to require a course and content. And I don't know if it has to be a course or if it can just be like modules inside courses. But anyway, high school graduation, media literacy requirements. And some of the folks with the Summer Institute for Digital Literacy that I've been a part of the last 3 years are active in that. I wonder if they're including in that some specific pieces about free speech and trying to help educate students about these kinds of issues. There's an interesting overlay with citizenship and, you know, the government class, as you mentioned, you know, former government teacher, the kinds of things we want students to know about 3 branches of government and participation and voting and responsibilities and rights and all. There's those things that we generally agree, yeah, we want kids to know about these things and understand them. So I wonder, and maybe I'll try to find that out. The other thing I'm thinking is, as I hopefully, okay, fingers crossed, if I don't get a university job by spring break, we're going to be looking at other jobs too. But hopefully I'm going to be able to make the move into higher ed. And that could be at a tier 1 institution where I'm going to need to do research. I wonder who's doing that research, right? Because we could measure perceptions of high school students about the First Amendment, about free speech. I would bet that a lot of those perceptions are very colored by the polarized media, by parents and things like that. And so I think those would be important perceptions to try to help address factually, so that we're not just buying this idea that, yes, all, you know, conservative voices are silenced by social media. Therefore, you know, we need to, you know, on that basis, you know, punish the technology companies. I think we do need some regulation personally. But this is also where the tech correction is interesting, because you have folks from the left and the right coming from different perspectives, and they're saying, yes, regulate. But, you know, sometimes they're saying that for different reasons. All right. You had one other article there under tech correction, I think, and it was something about we won. Tech won. Now what? You want to do that one?
Yeah, there was a really interesting, it's a brief commentary, but it does touch on a lot of the issues we talk about in regards to tech correction. Shira Ovaid, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, is the writer in the New York Times on December 23rd. And it's part of their On Tech newsletter, which is actually pretty informative. I do like the New York Times' technology coverage in general. The context of the article is that technology won, right? Like, the bottom line is that it's provided a lot of good for our society, but it's also, exposed a lot of ugh in our society as well. We aren't necessarily getting some of the tech we thought would be here right now. And she specifically calls out things like driverless cars and packages delivered by drones. That most people assumed that we would be engaged in those kinds of technologies now. We're definitely not. But I loved her broader point, which is that our battle here is to regain the humanity in all this. That, the partisan divides that exist in the United States, it is very true that they've been extraordinarily continue to be shifted because of technology, but they existed underneath technology. Technology only exposed them, maybe made them worse, but didn't create those situations. And so we've probably, I've alone made this comment probably 15 times in the last year about the tech correction. Part of this is just figuring out, the humanity behind things, like making more interpersonal connections, seeing the human behind the screen. And I liked the article. I'd recommend reading it. I thought it was really good.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to think of her name. There's a really good MIT scholar, Sherry Turkle, who continues to write books and articles and pieces about that and how important it is that we humanize. And so good article reference. Well, we got about 12 minutes left. Where else do you want to try to go tonight? We're not going to get through all our articles. Imagine
No,
that.
not even close, actually. Well, let me give a couple of, actually, you've got one too, a really interesting looking one. Macworld had a great article on December 19th. I have moved back to the Apple universe, and I think I'm going to be in the market in 2022 for a personal MacBook Air. I've got a MacBook at work. But since I have a lot of ventures, I keep my work and my personal life separate as much as possible, even on machines. But there is a lot of rumors swirling around now about the next MacBook Air, since the current model is over a year old now. I think it's a year and a month old, and a lot of excitement around what's coming in the future. But their estimate is these are the 5 things that we can expect. One of them, a huge performance boost in the so-called M2 chip, and a lot of the super Apple nerds have been looking at the current iPad and iPhone chips. So the A15 chip is the one we're talking about, and trying to talk about the performance gains between the 14 and the 15, and using that as a rough estimate of what the performance gain will be between the M1 and the M2. And there is a lot of suggestion that it could be anywhere from 10 to 20% faster than the M1 chip, which is quite impressive considering how much faster the M1 chip was in comparison to its previous generation Intel processors. There is likely to be a brand new design for the MacBook Air, thinner and lighter, which would be a real feat considering that the current generation of MacBook Airs are pretty thin and pretty light. But also they are perhaps talking about colors, kind of a la the current iMacs that are released, 24-inch iMacs with the M1 chips that are released, kind of going back to the early days of the iMac when it was released 20 years ago, with a lot of different colors. Great new displays, 1080p FaceTime camera, and then the addition of the MagSafe. So a lot of the technology that went into this year's Pro MacBooks will likely make it into the more consumer and education-focused Air next year.
Wow, that is it's so fast now. It's kind of hard to imagine it, being even faster and better. So that's exciting. My Apple article is a little older, but pretty interesting. This is from Ars Technica back in April. And I think I found this, and I didn't put the article in there, but they're like top 10, tech. Well, maybe it's just the top 10 most read articles on Ars Technica or whatever. Anyway, it was one of these end of year things. So this is from April. The headline is Apple sued for terminating account with $25,000 worth of apps and videos. And so there were a couple class action lawsuits. And I'd like to follow up, and I wasn't able to do that before the show. But basically, it challenges the meaning of the words rent and buy. Now, I don't know if you can imagine an iTunes account where somebody has spent $25,000. I mean, what the heck do you buy? Pretty much every song ever made. I don't know. How much can you buy if you buy everything that's in the store? I don't know. But Apple in this lawsuit had argued, hey, anybody reasonable doesn't expect that they buy a song on iTunes and they have it forever. But that's what they were arguing, is to say, really, when it comes to this digital content, you're renting it or you're leasing it, because as long as you pay your subscription, in the case of, and I don't know, this was even talking about buying music. You're not gonna have it forever, and so they're making that analogy to analog, to say nobody comes into your house and takes the CD and says, hey, we're taking that back, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And we'll continue obviously to follow lawsuits with Epic and Apple and things like that, and maybe I'll see if I can do a follow-up, because that was 8 months ago, but I hadn't actually heard about that before. I thought that was interesting. And yes, it is probably just something I take for granted, that if I turn off my Spotify account, I mean, I don't have the expectation now of actually buying music, because I just rent and pay for the service, the opportunity to stream it for a while. But if I don't keep that account, then I'm not expecting to have that. So anyway, that was an interesting Apple article, and evidently was a big red article earlier in the year that I totally missed. So let's see here. Pick up here. How about the cloud broken one, the infrastructure? You want to do that one?
Oh yeah, let me. I've been meaning to have, or to talk about this in general, just because of the nature of the situation. But great article from Android Central Jerry Hillebrand on December 18th wrote that the cloud may be great, but it's also horribly broken. And they're talking about a couple of instances in the month of December where AWS, or Amazon Web Services, which is the massive cloud provider, probably the most dominant cloud provider. And if they're not the most dominant, they're amongst the most dominant, including folks like Azure, and some of the other legacy groups that have huge cloud services. But what the article talks about is that, obviously the cloud provides incredible advantages to end users and also IT departments. But there have been two instances in the last 30 days where AWS went down, and it took down a pretty serious amount of the web with it. And so things ranging from obviously Amazon and Amazon Web Services, their sites were impacted, but anything associated with Amazon, Ring, Prime Music, Alexa, it went down for a time period. McDonald's app went down. Disney Plus went down. The game League of Legends went down. The cloud services provided for that game went down as well. And it does speak to me the standpoint that fault tolerance and the ability to quickly restore, which is part of the benefit of a cloud-based world, is really super important, and that it's something you want to definitely consider if you're moving towards the cloud. But I can also hear that 10 years ago, when the cloud was starting to become popular, I knew some IT folks that said there's no way I want to subject my end users to, sites being down. And what I always thought, and I still think this is probably true in the bigger picture, that the chance of your local web servers going down, or I'm sorry, I should say storage servers going down, is probably a lot higher than AWS going down, right? The uptime is probably extraordinary on most of these services, but it is worthy of thinking about and talking about if so much infrastructure ends up being hosted on just a few of these broadly dominant cloud services.
Sorry to get an ad from a YouTube video coming up in my audio. I had to find the link as you're talking there, talking about the cloud. This is a link I'll drop into the chat here for a Smarter Everyday video episode from a few weeks ago on privacy and taking on big tech. He's got some drone video there of several different data centers and just talking about how vast these things are and huge. And anyway, it's like a visualization of some of what we're talking about here. So yeah, it's again, this goes back to security, goes back to dependency, goes back to where we are as a society. And I have not read that whole article, but given the headline, we've got work to do. We've got stuff to figure out. We don't benefit as consumers typically from monopoly. Southwest Old Grandma Bell, Southwestern Bell, whatever, the Baby Bells would possibly disagree. The AT&T of old. Because I think they really liked being, the only game in town. But in general, anyway, we don't, when there's only one provider and that provider goes down, there's a lot of problems. So we need to have robust standards. This is something good to educate students about as well, and educate them. This is why we need web standards, and this is why we need interoperability, and we need to have, multiple players, and we need to find ways for there to be stability and resiliency and redundancy and all those kind of things, even when you have a marketplace that's complex, where there's not, just one or two providers. So yeah, that's it's big. And the personal connection would be, where are your backups? Are your backups all on your same server? In fact, I just signed up today for a new backup system that would be better than what I had previously. I actually do have my backups going that I do for my WordPress sites, but this is for my entire Linux server. And this is to house it, in a different place. So anyway, redundancy, backups, thinking about stuff personally, thinking about stuff organizationally. It's important.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Oh my gosh, are we almost to the top of the hour? Well, we got 6 minutes. We started a little bit late. We could probably get another article or two before we Geek of the Week it. Let me do this one, because I tweeted I was going to do this one. This could be a lot, but San Francisco Chronicle yesterday, December 28th. 2 California teachers were secretly recorded speaking about LGBTQ student outreach. Now they're fighting for their jobs. We could go a lot of different directions with this, but the EdTech Situation Room sort of EdTech connection I want to bring out here is the teachers were working at a school where GoGuardian is used as a monitoring software for monitoring students. And part of what parents criticized the teachers for was that they noticed some teens were searching for some things that were related to LGBT topics. And so as a result, they approached those kids to say, hey, would you like to join our club? Now, there's a whole host of really important issues touching on political polarization and things like that. The thing, though, I wanted to really draw out of this article related to tech and related to teachers is, the experts cited in the article say that is not illegal. Like, it is not illegal for teachers to be noticing, what kids are searching for online using a tool like that and having a conversation with them. Now, if those teachers, and they didn't in this case, were, quote, outing kids or, doing something, beyond having a conversation with them, inviting them to a student organization, which is approved by the principal and legit and all this stuff, there was not any illegal teacher behavior here. But certainly that article, speaks to the very, very polarized times that we live in, how difficult it is to talk about controversial issues, how important it is to talk about them. And then I think the other technology connection is we just really should assume we're being recorded when we're giving a presentation at a conference, when we're even talking with colleagues, sadly, when we're talking with students. There's a lot of examples of that kind of thing. And, these teachers had specifically asked for this small presentation. It wasn't at a public conference, but it was among colleagues at their school where they were talking about this situation. They had asked for this not to be recorded, and it was given to, a journalist that looked for this kind of content apparently to really create a splash. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Let me read I want to read the article in more detail. Let's talk about this one next week.
Okay. It's a super, it can be a catalyst for really, really good conversations.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be good to take that up a little bit more next week. And the conversations are way beyond GoGuardian and technology. It's also conversations, with counselors, with teachers, with the ways that we're engaging with students and the things that we're talking about. And do we have safe places to talk about those at school? So yeah, we can take that up next time.
Yep, that's it.
All
yeah,
right.
And there's a lot there.
There's a lot there. Okay, yeah, I sort of dropped a bomb there at the end of the show. So, should we geek of the week it?
Yeah, sure. And I've got a really quick one I can share. And I checked to see if I'd shared this one before, because this is actually a website I get a lot of delight out of. It's called Coffeativity.com. And Coffeativity basically plays background noise that you would experience at a coffee shop, lunchtime rush. There's a university one, which sounds kind of university-ish. They have some research behind this that says that the kind of light, dull buzzing of a coffee shop is actually a very productive space for your brain, for creativity. But and I've had this website, and I don't really know how old it is. I've been probably using this for 6 or 7 years. But I will sometimes, when I want a really focused hour of work at work, and turn my email off and shut the ringer off my phone and want to get something done, this is one of the websites I have bookmarked in every one of my browsers because I like the background. And and it's actually oddly calming. And I will also say too that that's the university. That one of the things I miss most in the era of COVID is I would quite frequently spend whole Saturday mornings at a coffee shop with my laptop, doing not anything in particular, or maybe getting something done or not. It's one of the things I miss the most in the era of COVID, and can't wait till I can go back and I have favorite chairs and tables at every coffee shop in town. I love coffee shops. And so it's kind of a little bit of coffee shop, but in an app or a website. So coffeativity.com.
That's awesome. 3 quick ones for me. I have been working on websites, restoring sites, and also archiving sites. And so I've been was searching actually today for a free, hopefully, web page editor that is 64-bit and will run on my Big Sur, M1 MacBook Air, yada, 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 and came across this software, which is in beta and it's free right now. It's called Xway. And it is created by the folks that had created Freeway, which is another web design software. I'm not planning on using this extensively, but I need to make some static websites that have some links for some WordPress sites I don't want to run WordPress on anymore. I'm using SiteSucker, thanks to Alan Levine, to pull it down like the web whacker of old. If you're that old to remember what those days were like when you had to download the websites because you had school computers that weren't even connected with a modem to the internet. That shows you how old we are around here. But the website that I've just put something up today was archives.wesfryer.com. So that's going to grow in the next few days. And then the last thing is I do not blog that often, but I wrote a blog post and it was sharing some pretty cool social media things I've learned, stories. I've realized those are a thing on Instagram and on Facebook, but I've started to share a lot more my posts and a lot of cooking stuff, of course. But I wrote a little post about stories, reels, which are, videos that you can just kind of, I guess, mindlessly scroll through. But there's a pretty cool program I discovered for the iPhone called Mojo, and you can create reels for Facebook or Instagram or other social media. And that's kind of cool. So that's it. That's my overshare.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Fryer. And hey, speaking of, where can we find you on the internet?
I am W Fryer on the Twitters, and my websites are all updated as I've been applying for jobs. So just go to wesfryer.com and you'll find everything you need to include my teaching portfolio, which I created about a month ago. How about you, Dr. Neiffer?
I am best found on Twitter, Tech Savvy Teach. But this here is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once-a-week podcast. We broadcast on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Central Time, somewhere in the middle of the night UTC. You can see us live on YouTube and Facebook. You can always go to our Twitter account, edtechsr.com. I'm sorry, at EdTechSR. I'm losing it tonight. Where you can, we always broadcast a link out so you can join us live. We hope you would take the opportunity to do that at some point to see us live. If not, you can always find the podcast anywhere finer podcasts are aggregated. You can go to our website, edtechsr.com, and download an MP3, or you can see the archives on Facebook or YouTube. Stay safe, stay savvy.
It's the 1AR, ladies and gentlemen, and he did not drop.
Yeah, and I did not cover the spread. And we hope to see you next time in 2022 on the EdTech Situation Room. So
that's right. Happy New Year, everyone.